All right, everybody. We've got Matt Peterson here with us. He is a farmer here in the local area down in Weber County, producing vegetables. He's been implementing soil health practices in his system, integration of cover crops and things like that into vegetable production. He's got a lot of good things going on down there in Weber County, and we wanted to bring him up and share his experiences with you. So if you'll give the time to him, and he's going to go through his presentation, and then we'll have a little bit of questions at the end for him. So
we go to 35? 135?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Like you said, my name's Matt Peterson. I'm in Weber County. And to be honest with you today, I came a little bit late. I had an appointment this morning that I couldn't miss. And I pulled into the parking lot, and I saw all these pickup trucks out here, and I said, oh no. There's not much I'm going to be able to tell these guys. It's going to be new information. And most of probably what you know is probably new information for me. Because as an agriculture and farming community, I already know that you have a lot of knowledge about soil health. So what I can try to show you today is maybe some failures that I've had on my farm and some successes that I've had on my farm that then you can take and implement in your production. So first thing I want to start with is just with my family. So I'm a fifth generation farmer, and the picture's outdated. I have another son. I have 4 sons. And it was always kind of just a hobby farm. We grow fruits, vegetables, pumpkins, about 3 million pounds of fruits and vegetables. It was always kind of a hobby farm. My dad was a real estate developer, still is to this day. And I went to college to get a degree to be a businessman, and I thought I'd wear a suit and tie every day and do something in the business world. And this time was probably about 2008, 2009, and it was hard to find jobs back then. And after graduating college and finding that maybe employment was kind of tough to secure, I said, Dad, let's explore the option of making this farm a viable business that I can make an income at and raise my family. And 10 years later, we've been able to do that. We've been able to make some changes to make that happen. And I'm excited for soil health because we're farming ground that's been in the family for 100 years, and I want to make sure it's healthy so when my sons, if they choose to farm, they'll be able to have something to farm on. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with this type of a picture, but this was me about 10, 15 years ago, flooding a field of pumpkins. And in this picture, you'll see I have a white bag of water, and I'm irrigating some pumpkins. And what does this have to do with soil health? Well, soil health to me my story starts a long time ago, so I'm going to kind of explain this to you. I wasn't really keen on farming with this method. It was a lot of work, way too much work for me. And I love where I'm at in Taylor and Weber County, but we are on blow sand soil. I mean, it just blows. It's the type of soil that if you have alfalfa or something on it and you put the water on for 36 hours, it goes 100 feet and then bubbles up in the neighbor's cornfield next door. I mean, the water, it's just tricky to water. It washes away your headlands. You can see in the picture, furrows kind of blend together over time. And I thought, man, this is going to be a long 40 years of my life. And I didn't want that anymore. So I got on the internet, and I was researching on particularly watermelons, seedless watermelons, and I started finding out that there was farmers out there that were doubling and tripling their yields by doing some things differently. Now, that's not fair. I want to have high yields as well. I want to be able to make some more money. So the first thing we kind of looked at was drip irrigation and plastic culture. So what I did is I bought a textbook off of Amazon, and I was the first producer in my area to do any of this type of thing, and I designed a drip irrigation system. And we implemented some plastic culture. So those are some weathered cantaloupes that we just got planted. This is year 1 of planting some cantaloupes in a plastic bed with a drip tape underneath. And over time, we were able to refine this process. This is some kids that I have worked for me that are planting some cantaloupes into that plastic bed. And there's some peppers going in. Those are half-mile long runs. So that's a lot of fun to plant that many peppers. So there's a little baby watermelon plant and a little tiny cantaloupe plant. So why am I showing you this? Well, for me, year 1 of drip irrigation and plastic culture was a success. There was some, looking back now, 10 years later, there were some serious fatal errors that I made in my designs. I was self-designing all my systems, self-engineering all my systems. I was going off of what I learned on YouTube and on Amazon through a book. But it worked. Our yields were increased. And I said, wow, and everyone's kind of like, you're crazy doing this type of stuff. And it really worked. We were able to get good yields on all of our plants. So what I'm getting at is I dialed in where I was at on irrigation, and that improved my overall success as a farmer. Next few slides I'm going to go through just kind of illustrate some of what we grow. I think that's kind of interesting. At least I find it's interesting. We grow about 600,000 pounds of cantaloupe, and we distribute all over the region. We go to Associated Food Stores, Walmart, Albertsons, and we actually even send produce down into Valley Produce, which is in LA. And that's just a load of cantaloupe coming in out of the field. And then this is some of our harvesting equipment that we built. At least I find this type of stuff interesting. They load the harvester up with the cantaloupe as they're out there picking and load up the wagons. And then one of my favorite times of the year is the fall time of year, the fall ornamentals. We grow a lot of different, like 20 different types of pumpkins. We're pushing over 2 million pounds of pumpkins now, jack-o'-lanterns. And to me, this is where I really wanted to improve my soil, was in my pumpkin fields, because I was going year after year after year in pumpkin production, and I thought, man, I got to do something a little bit different for me, and this is a big part of what I produce is my pumpkins. So, and we also do some other fun ornamentals in the fall ornamentals, the gourds, the mini pumpkins and stuff. So what I'm getting at now is okay, we've established where we're at on irrigation. The next thing I went to do is I went to the NRCS. I said, okay, I've heard that you're giving out free money, and I want to take some of that free money. And that's just what I had heard. And they said, well, here's some programs that you can sign up for, and it's not really free money. You got to do this and this and this. I'll give you a grant, and hopefully you're able to improve your farm. So I said, okay, that sounds good. So we put in some high tunnels. So this is one of my high tunnels that I have back home. We grow tomatoes in them. And just kind of cool pictures. I thought, this is right about mid-March when we're planting our tomatoes. We stake them up, and then they grow into that when we harvest them. Now, on the soil health side of my high tunnels, right today, I am intense grazing my high tunnels with a herd of goats. So I locked up all the sides, threw in a bunch of goats in there, and they're just chomping on everything, the residue from the tomatoes and whatever else is in there. So that's what I'm doing for intense grazing purposes. So let's get into cover crops. That's why we're all here today. So I've kind of improved where I'm at on my irrigation. I know where I'm at on that. I've improved where I'm at on my fertilization. I'm doing my fertilizer in my water. I'm making really nice plastic beds. I feel like I got that down. Well, I come to one of these conferences about 6 years ago, and I think it was probably the first conference that they were putting on. It was the first one I ever went to. And just like today, I had some really smart individuals stand up and teach me about the carbon cycle. And I thought, wow, that's really neat. And they were talking about cover crops and no-till and improving your organic matter and your soil biology. And these are all things that I had never heard of, but they sounded right. I pretty much went home from that conference deciding that I was going to be a no-till, organic, 100% farmer. And I was gung-ho all about it. Well, that only lasted 2 or 3 days, and reality hit in that, okay, maybe I can't do all of the things that I learned about at that conference, but what can I do? In the vegetable world, it makes cover cropping a little bit complicated. We start our bed making process about mid-April, and then we're planting about the 15th of May, right after last frost date. And then we're, all the ground's in cultivation with plants. We start about the 24th of July with our melon harvest, tomato harvest, and go right into our squash harvest, 1st of September, and then it used to be about mid-September we were harvesting pumpkins, but actually the last 2 years I've been harvesting pumpkins on the 30th of August, which to me is crazy, because they're not going to make it to Halloween, but that's how I get people to buy 2 pumpkins, I guess. So what I'm getting at is I don't have time to do cover crops during that time of year. I'm at my wit's end to get everything done that needs to be done. And we're in pumpkin production from about the 1st of September all the way to Halloween. And then from Halloween, pretty much the entire month of November, I'm frantically trying to pull plastic out of the ground, drip tape out of the ground, put filter stations and pumps away that we use for drip irrigation, and try to clean up the farm to where I can actually get a crop in the ground, cover crop. I'm not getting any fall growth, okay? I think I have a slide here. Oh, it must not be in here. So there was a little video that I attached, but basically I thought it was kind of funny. It was a video, a selfie that I took in a tractor like at midnight one night planting cover crop. I think it was my second year planting cover crop. And last night as I was kind of putting these pictures together, I noticed the timestamp on the picture said December 2nd. I was planting cover crop on the 2nd of December at like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning because I remember there was a big snowstorm coming the next day, and I wanted to beat that snowstorm. So that's where I'm coming at, is as I'm kind of crunched in time to get my cover crop in. But I thought, well, you know what? I can either do no cover crops or I can be crunched in time and plant something, and hopefully it winters, and hopefully it comes up in the spring, and hopefully it turns into something. So that's kind of what I did. Again, kind of with the drip irrigation thing that I've been through, I didn't have tons of help on this, not a lot of knowledge, just kind of shooting off the hip. I called some folks in the Midwest, kind of got their opinions. They said, well, you probably don't want to do a very diverse mix of seeds because you're planting late in the season and you might not really get a good overwinter. They talked me into going with a cereal rye, which I thought was a good idea. It's pretty cheap, pretty easy to grow. So I've been planting a lot of cereal rye. And this picture up here you can see has some of my boys in it and cereal rye grass coming in. This is probably one of my heaviest fields I have. It's not in the sand. And this is where I put a lot of my pumpkins. It's one of my bigger fields. And so I plant cereal rye in the fall, and it sits in the wintertime, and then in the spring it's popping up. And it usually pops up right about now. I've actually, probably in the next week or so, I'll start going and do some scouting, and I'll probably start to see some rye coming up out of the ground, I imagine, in the next few weeks. Okay? So this is a picture one thing that I really need to work on my operation is finding time to take more pictures, because I really don't have a lot of great data as far as pictures. But what I do have, I'm showing you. So this is cereal rye that's got up a little bit that I'm actually spraying to kill. So going back to my first few years of doing cover crop, this had been like 2015, 2016. I heard a lot about an allelopathic factor. Have any of you heard of allelopathic chemical? Well, you maybe want to hear about it with cereal rye. A lot of people said that, cereal rye produces an allelopathic chemical in the soil that prohibits, or not prohibits, but makes other seeds not germinate. And I thought, wow, that's not good, because I want to plant pumpkin seeds in that ground. So that was a big challenge kind of overcoming my first year, is I was calling the county extension agents and other people, and they're like, well, we really don't know how long this chemicals stick around in the soil. And so I was like 1st of April, I was out there with the Roundup to kill it, because I wanted to make sure it was dead, and that by May 15th I could go in and plant my pumpkin seeds. And so you can see that's why it's not incredibly tall. It's probably only 8 to 12 inches tall in this picture. That's because I'm out there trying to kill it, to terminate it, and it terminates really well with Roundup. So that's what I was using. So after kind of playing around with that for a few years, I kind of started doing some more research on YouTube and on Instagram, and I found this pumpkin farmer that's in, I believe he's in Ohio, and he was doing this incredible thing. He was planting cereal ryegrass in the fall, and he would leave little strips. It's almost like he plugged up a piece of his drill every 5 feet. So it left this little strip of no cereal ryegrass. And he must have been GPSing them in, or he had a really good driver because they were really straight. And he must have been doing it in the fall because in these pictures, this rye was getting up like chest deep. And he built or had built this machine that in the springtime when this rye was up this tall, he was going through and he was rolling it, crimping it, which is rolling it flat like this, okay? But as he was doing that, those little windows or aisleways down the middle of the field were left open, and then on the back of his machine, he had a planter that was planting pumpkin seeds right in the middle of those windows. And I thought, wow, that's an incredible thing. I'm a pumpkin farmer. I ought to be doing that. So I took that to my folks, my dad and my brother, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. They said, hey, what about that allelopathic chemical? And I said, well, yeah, what about that? He's killing that rye the same day he's planting his pumpkin seed in it. So it turns out, well, maybe that's not something I ought to be too worried about. So I thought, well, maybe we can let it grow a little bit longer. So I was determined to try this, and I didn't have any equipment to really try it. So what I did is I planted my rye, and I actually decided to do this during the winter time. And on the field that I wanted to do it in, I didn't have cover crop in because it was a new field I just pulled out of hay. And so I actually looked, I did this in 2019. I planted the ryegrass the 18th of March. If you remember last spring, it was really, really wet. So I got in really late with my cover crop seed. And I planted it, and it got up maybe about this high. I think I put some nitrogen on it, tried to get it to speed up. And I got it up about this high, and it must not be on here because I had a little video. But basically what I did is I didn't have a crimper, I pulled my roller harrow over it, and it just kind of went like this and stood back up. And I had to go over it like 3 times to crimp it down and get it to stay down. And everyone, I could swear, like all the other farmers in the county were driving real slow down the road saying, what the crap is this guy doing? And so I'm like, oh, well, okay. So you can see in this picture, I've crimped it down with my roller harrow. I've gone over it like 3 times. And you could see I sprayed these little alleyways when the rye was real young. So I had these little alleyways every 5 feet to plant my seeds in. And then I went back through and I got my planter and I planted my seeds in it. And again, this is where I fell as a farmer. I didn't take very adequate pictures. I do have a picture of this. Now, this is a picture of a defective drip tape that has a film over the emitter that I was really upset and sending to the manufacturer. That has nothing to do with my presentation other than you can see the rye underneath it, crimped and looking like beautiful rye. You know, and it was thick, like a thick mesh of rye. And so I planted those pumpkin seeds in those little alleyways, and okay, we're in Utah, we're in a desert. This guy, this idol that I have on Instagram that I follow, this pumpkin guy, he's in a climate where he's getting a lot of water from Mother Nature. That doesn't work in Utah. This soil was bone dry because I let that cover crop grow all through April and through most of May. And this was bone dry soil. I was going to germinate 1 pumpkin seed in it. So I had to immediately pull my drip tape in and water my pumpkins up, which I did. And it was a huge success. This isn't my picture. I just found this off the internet. I failed all year not to take a single picture of that field. But this is the same concept. I had these pumpkins growing up in this bed of rye. Well, what does that do for me? Well, improves soil health because like we learned in the presentation before, you get the cover. But as a producer, what does that do for me? Keeps my pumpkins off the dirt, which is huge. Well, number one complaint I get is you got dirty pumpkins. It's like you grow pumpkins on the dirt. How do you not have dirty pumpkins? Well, now I'm growing them on a straw bed. That was the one big thing. And the second thing is it kept the weeds down, which was really a benefit to me because my hoeing bill is quite high. So this will be something that will be in my future. Now, if you guys, I don't know if there's any vegetable guys in the crowd here, but Weber County Extension is actually put in a grant to buy a crimper, a 3-point hitch crimper, and an interseeder so we can do things like this that they're willing to rent out. so you're not having to use your roller harrow 3 times to try to crimp it down. So I'm really excited to have the proper equipment and see what what happens to this trial, and we're going to be doing it again here in 2020. So I want to talk a little bit about, okay, this is some of the stories that I have from using cover crops for soil health. What have I seen as benefits? Because this is all application. Have I really seen a benefit? Well, other than some cleaner pumpkins, that's a big benefit. Okay, what else have I seen? Well, let's talk about money. We're all interested in money. I don't think I've yet paid for a cover crop seed. I've either gotten grants through the NRCS or through my conservation district to pay for my cover crop seed. That's a big plus, right? And those options are available for all you folks as well. I'm on the Weber County Conservation District. I would be thrilled to have a producer come in and say, hey, can I have some money to put in some cover crop seed? And I'm probably pretty certain if you're here in Box Elder County or any other county, your districts probably would be the same way. Secondly, the NRCS has programs that help. I have a program that I'm in right now with the NRCS, just to give you some numbers. I have about, I think, around 80, maybe 100 acres in the program. It's a 3-year program, and they're paying me, I want to say it's a $4,000 or $5,000 annual payment to do this. So it's worth it to go talk to those folks and try to get involved in some of these programs because they're interested in cover crops and soil health, okay? And you have to kind of meet some of their criteria. The criteria for my farm is I have to have 4 species of cover crops. So I just call up the folks at Green Cover Seed and tell them this is what I want, and they ship it out to me, and we go from there. So I'm a huge fan of cereal rye because it works well in my application. As a pumpkin farmer, vegetable farmer, it's something I could put in the winter. It can get some spring growth. I've done the hairy vetch, the peas, the legumes, the purple head turnip. Kind of funny story about that. I planted that one year, and I either planted it way too heavy, or it must have went to seed and like populated all my ground in Weber County because it's in all my fields now and it comes up every year. And my guys that work for me have learned that this big turnip-looking bush, when they're out hoeing and killing weeds, not to kill it. And they'll let it grow. And I'll be in a pumpkin field, and there'll be this big turnip, and I'll go to pull it out, and they'll yell at me. And when we go, this is serious, when we go to haul pumpkins in the end of the year, they pull them all up and take them home and eat them. They say they're the best thing in the world. So I haven't tried that yet, but the tillage turnip and the radish, those are really good for compaction, and I saw that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about money, where we're at there. Doesn't cost a lot, at least in my opinion, to do what I'm doing. I'm only farming 130 acres. But let's talk about some return on investment. I just jotted down some numbers. I'm scratching my head, and I'm about like taking pictures as like I am taking numbers. I don't do a very good job. I trying to scratch my head. I think I started cover cropping in about 2015. And in 2016, on my pumpkin fields, I yielded just under 30,000 pounds to the acre. Okay, that's 1 year in. No one told me to expect fantastic numbers in year 1. I think we're going to call that my baseline, my average. Okay, so my second year, I went up to 34,000 pounds, so about 4,000 pounds to the acre more. That would have been my second year. My third year, 2018, would have also been about the same, about 34,000 pounds. Now my fourth year, and that's what they say, at least that's what YouTube told me, 4 years in, that's where you start to get like the magic number of return on investment. I went up to 41,000 pounds. So that is 11,000 pounds higher than what my baseline would have been my first year. Oh. Okay. I mean, it's not much to look at. But like I said, this is my one video of me planting, beating the storm, and I'm sure you guys have all been there. You're all ag producers. You got to beat that storm. But I wanted to show, look, Ideally, you get this stuff in August. If you're getting this stuff in December, it's still okay. And then the second one, beautiful rye, I thought, for only being like 2 months old. And you can see just a basic little roller harrow. And I had to go over it 3 times to get it all stay down. So that's not the way it's supposed to be done, but that's the way I did it. So no. I'm only going to do this new method on my pumpkin crop because I don't use plastic on pumpkins. One of the biggest reasons I use plastic is it warms up the soil bed early in the spring, so I'm getting to the market first with my melons and my tomatoes. And if I'm to the market first, I'm the winner. I used to say no one wanted a pumpkin in August, but surprisingly, I'm starting to do that. But I don't use plastic on pumpkins because it's not as critical for me to be early, and pumpkins it's not much wiggle room on what I make per acre. They're just not a high value crop.
On your plastic, tell us about it. Is it like one meal, and will it break down, and do it in different wicks?
Okay, yeah. On the plastic culture side of things, I use 1.25 mil plastic. Comes in a 4-foot or 5-foot width, and it's a full plastic, a polyurethane plastic that it's going to stay there forever. So, locally, no one. Rain Flow Irrigation out of Pennsylvania, Rain FLO, Flow Irrigation. They're a good source. They'll ship some out to you. But like I say, it will stay there forever, so you have to have a plan to get it out of your soil. I have machinery that does it. Actually, 2020 will be the first year that I'm going to be experimenting with some biodegradable stuff, which they make.
I've done biodegradable on our vegetable place, and you got to be careful with it. You put too much of a stretch on it. When you get that heat, it just rips.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a difference, and it takes most of the season. I've still got biodegradable pieces.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
you wanted to use it for onions, I mean, is there not a machine, but something you can go through, punch your holes, or something that works to punch your holes, and it'll tear it?
No, I mean, we use those transplanters. Can you go back to the slideshow? We use a transplanter that pokes a hole, puts a little bit of water in for my transplant. You can buy it perforated that has some tears and holes already in it for things to grow through, like onions. I don't think I've seen a few guys do onions with that. Yeah, like that machine there. That whale's poking a hole as it goes around and is putting that in. So I'll start as soon as I can get on it, which is hopefully about the 1st of April, just because I got 100 acres or so to put down. It takes a long time. Yeah, yep. Sorry, what was that? I don't. Now, that's a great question, though. I don't plant anything in between my rows, but I would love to. And what I'm trying to illustrate to you today is you've got to start somewhere and build off of it. And for me, I started with drip irrigation, and it's formed from irrigation to plastic mulch to cover crops. What I would love to be doing is interseeding some rye or something in between these rows of beds. For wind control on my blow sand. I get a bad storm, you can strip a whole field of vegetables down to nothing in just a few hours. It's like sandpaper on them. But 2 is for soil health and covering that soil. So like I said, with Weber County buying an interseeder this year, I'm excited to maybe try some of that in between my bed rows. Because then I could get in August, or when not in August, they'd probably vined up, but I can get in earlier before they vined up, maybe try to plant some of those different biodiverse cover crops and not just be doing rye. So, good question, though. So, we've got a few more minutes. Is there anything else? So that in my high tunnels, I've gone to just like a full weed barrier, and It's just because I'm usually too busy to keep them weed-free. So that's like a thick 15 mil fabric I've poked holes through to plant my tomatoes in. But they're planted in the soil inside of the high tunnel. They're not in pots or trays or anything. And then I'm planting in that, growing them. And then what I do is, I don't have a picture of it, but I fold these fabrics back so they're right along the edges, and I have a multi-bay tunnel. And then I'll go throw some cover crop seed down in there. I literally just throw it down, water it up, let it come up, and it'll grow most winter because it's warm in there. Then I put the goats in there and let them chomp it down. Yeah, then I throw a rototiller through it. I don't know if that's the best thing to be doing, but that's what I do. Yeah, we'll delete that out. I water a lot just because in a covered culture, you're gonna have salt buildup because you're getting no rain events, no snow events inside of there, and so you're collecting a lot of salts. So what I do is, when I don't have my crops in there and I'm just doing cover crops, I'll do 2 or 3 deep waterings. Like, I'll just turn it on. I'm just using culinary water because that's all that's available in the dead of winter, and I'm doing these deep waterings trying to leach those. Yeah. I have, that one's a 30 by 166. I have, about 3/4 of an acre under high tunnels. So, but that's important to wash your salts out. Yeah, it is. Yep. It's irrigation water that's been filtered, yes. Drip irrigation, you have to have some filtration. I've done both. Underneath's a little hard just to get your spacing right, and it tends to pond when it's on top, so there's advantages, disadvantages to both, I guess. It does percolate through, yeah. I've done a grow span one, and I'll leave it at that on grow spans. Zimmerman out of Missouri has a fantastic high tunnel. Pauly West out of California have an all right high tunnel. I've gotten to the point where I'm doing them now that I'm just ordering the frames pre-bent, and then I'm sourcing all my other components because I can do it cheaper that way. I don't need the kits anymore. What's that? The frame, I mean, as long as you don't hit it with a tractor, it'll be a long time, which we've done a time or two. But let's see. On high tunnels, you typically have a single or double layer of film. On my double layer films, I put a tunnel in 6 years ago. I noticed 2 weeks ago that the top layer just ripped in our last big windstorm. So I got about 6 years of life out of that film. If you're just single layer film, you're probably more like a 4-year life. Yes. Yeah. Every one of them's been paid by the NRCS. In Ogden. Yeah. Go talk to them, folks. They'll help you out with the high tunnels. They've been really good with me to work with. Every one of my tunnels has been funded. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. They're my sister's goats, and I don't really know what she has in there. It changes, but I think there's probably about 10 in the tunnel in right now. It's a 30 by 72. They've been in there for a week or two. What's that? No. They're not getting out. We roll up the sides and leave about that much air vent so they don't cook. They'll get 100 degrees in there, even in the wintertime if you're not careful. But if you leave the sides down about that far, it's like 60 degrees in there right now, probably 60 or 70.
Okay, maybe one more question?
Yeah, we're getting low on time, but is there one more? Anyone? Thanks. I appreciate your time. I hope I've answered a question or two for you. So.